Hey guys, it's Kyle with MAPerformance, back again with some Cobb goodies for our 22 WRX. As you guys see in front of me, we've got Cobb's Drivetrain upgrade kit. This is good from the 2015 WRX, the VA chassis, all the way up to the new VB chassis WRX. So this is just kind of an all-in-one, tighten up your shifter assembly, feel more in tune with your car, and really get the feels, you know, when you're slaying in gears. And today we're going to install this along with their new VB specific chassis, intercooler, and their patented thrust tunnel. A number of these products are super helpful. Obviously the shift knob, that's just going to bling up the interior of your car. But what about the shifter plate, shifter bushing, and the shifter stop? This is going to affect the amount of throw in your shifter. So this is affecting the pivot point in which the shifter linkage actually moves on. With this, you have the option of a 15% or a 35% reduction in throw. You're just going to be able to be transitioning in between those gears just a little bit faster, and also have some adjustability if you don't like that 35% throw reduction. You can go to that 15, which is a little bit closer to stock, somewhere kind of in the middle between stock and a pretty short throw. It just overall gives you some tunability with your drivetrain feel. Shifter bushing, this is pretty self-explanatory for the most part. This is just replacing the little eyelet bushing that is inside the shifter linkage, just tightening things up, making sure everything's hunky-dory in there. And lastly, they have the shifter stop. What this does is tighten up your first and second gear throw. Obviously, for the reverse lockout, there's a plate that keeps things nice and tight in fifth and sixth. What this is, it essentially mimics that, but just with your first and second gear. That way you're not overthrowing it when you're going into first and second. You have a hard stop, and then you can go straight forward into first gear. And this guy has a little bit of adjustability too. Also, if you really wanted to, you could use this as a first and second gear lockout. I'm not telling you that's what it's intended for, but you could set this guy all the way in and then never money shift your car. And then obviously not pictured in front of me, like we talked about, we have the Cobb WRX intercooler and the thrust tunnel. Essentially, this is just a piece that attaches to the hood scoop, and then the intercooler, obviously it's much larger, much more flow happy, much more inducive to some flow. So this is going to be a supporting mod when you want to start to turn up the boost, maybe even get an upgraded turbo on there. Just another one of those supporting mods to keep things cool, keep things calm, collect, you know, all the good things. Obviously this car is relatively new to the tuning scene, so it's still kind of getting put through the ringer. We're going to go through all that and install it and give you some tips along the way. After we're done installing all these parts on the car, we're going to go ahead, throw it on the dyno, and show you the results of the Cobb Stage 1 tune paired with the intercooler, and just kind of see how it goes, and give you guys some numbers and talk about that at the end. So now we're going to go ahead and install all these parts on our WRX. The first thing that we're going to start with is our shifter stop. To do this, it's also kind of in conjunction with our shift knob. So we're going to go ahead and remove the shift knob. Then there's going to be a couple plastic clips that hold the center bezel in there, kind of give those a solid yank, and that whole thing should come out along with the boot, and you'll get clear access to the shifter assembly. From there, it's just two 10mm bolts, and that will release the OEM shifter stop for the reverse lockout. From there, you'll leave the factory reverse lockout in place. Then you'll install the two studs that are included in the kit, as long as the two shallower nuts, the two thinner nuts, will go on there. From there, you'll hand tighten those and make sure that your reverse lockout is still adjusted correctly. And then you'll go ahead and install the shifter stop. There's some detailed documentation on Cobb's install instructions on how to kind of set this up to your desired liking, but essentially you can put the car in first gear and move the shifter stop fore and aft and kind of dial in how much overthrow you would like. Then go ahead and install the included washers facing up and the included nuts and snug those down, and then just go through the gears and make sure everything feels how you want it to, and make sure you can still make it into every single gear, no problem. From there, you'll go ahead and reinstall that bezel, making sure that all of the clips are pushed down and secure. And then we went ahead and threw on our Cobb shift knob just to tidy it all up and give it a little bit of interior bling. Working forward, we're going to get rid of the shifter bushing and the shifter plate. So for this, we're going to lift the car up into the air. We're going to remove the transmission cross member. We used a bottle jack or a screw jack to kind of hold the transmission up, and that way you're not putting a lot of load on the bolts when you're pulling them out. So we did that, got that out of the way. And there's two miscellaneous covers that you're going to remove. These are 12mm bolts. The lower one that you'll see now, that one comes completely off. The other one you will remove 3 bolts out of, and then it can kind of be wiggled out of the way. The 4th bolt really isn't accessible unless you remove the transmission or really drop that thing down. On Cobb's install instructions, and obviously these, we left that 4th bolt installed and installed the 3 other bolts, and we're able to wiggle that out of the way. At this point, you'll want to remove the shifter assembly. So to remove the shifter linkage, you'll remove the cotter pin and the locking clip from their respective holders, and this will allow you to fish the linkage out of the way and give you clear access to the shifter plate. Now the shifter plate is secured with a roll pin. Now if you don't have a roll pin punch, this might be a little bit more difficult, but it can still be achieved. Now what you're going to do is take your punch and punch out the 2 pins that are holding the shifter plate to the actual transmission. Once you knock these 2 pins out, you'll be able to remove the shifter plate entirely. Don't be fooled like I was. There's actually on the VB chassis 2 pins inside of each other, and we'll get into that a little bit later because that will aid you on your reinstallation. But be sure not to lose these roll pins, as Cobb does not include replacements, so it's imperative that you do not lose them. On Cobb's instructions, they tell you to punch them just out enough to where you can remove the shifter plate, but not all the way out, because otherwise you could lose them. Try your best to make sure that they stay just barely secure in there so you can pull the plate out. Pulling the plate out, you're gonna have to wiggle it a little bit. It's kind of a little fun game. It's not a lot of room in there, but eventually you will get it out. I promise it is possible. From there, once you get it out, move it to your workbench, your workspace, wherever, and fully remove the roll pin from the OEM shift plate. From there, you're gonna grab your new Cobb adjustable weighted shift plate, and you're gonna just loosely install that cotter pin back into place. Just start it enough that it's starting, but it's not protruding into the hole. And then lastly, you will have to install the pivot bushing. Cobb does include some Loctite with this. I would go ahead and put that on there. That is the last thing that you want to fall out when you're driving down the road. And then the lowermost hole is for the 15% throw, and the uppermost throw is the 35% throw. And that's what we chose to go with. I like a really short throw, so that's what we went with because I'm the one installing it and I'm the only opinion that matters in this case. After this, you're gonna take your Cobb shift plate and put it back on the pin that's protruding from the transmission. Now this is when things get kind of difficult. So for our case, we had to use a pick to roll the pin over just a little bit so that it was easier to get a punch in there and align the pins. Now what I did is there's 2 roll pins inside of each other, a smaller one and a larger one. I drove the smaller pin in first to kind of get me mostly aligned so it wasn't free spinning. And once I got it there, I was able to drive the larger pin in to fully secure it in place. So that is my tip to you. Drive the smaller pin in to locate it, and then drive the larger pin in to secure. After that, it's time to install the shifter bushing. This is as easy as taking a pair of channel locks and pushing the old one out, and then you will just slide the new one in. There's 3 screws to secure the Cobb shift bushing to the shift linkage. They even include an Allen wrench to do this, so it makes life really, really easy. And then from there, you will work in reverse, reinstall the clip and the washer and cotter pin back onto the shift linkage. And then from there, it's just reinstalling the brackets and the transmission mount, and then you're done. So after we did all this, the first thing that I did was jump in the car and feel how the shifter felt. And honestly, that 35% reduction in throw was perfect. It was exactly to my liking. Like I said, I like a really short throw. And overall, it just felt a little bit tighter. It's kind of crazy to think that an almost brand new car could kind of have a sloppy shifter feel, but as soon as I put all of these parts in, I noticed an immediate difference that felt a lot better, honestly. I would say this is a very warranted upgrade, because once you feel how it feels now, you won't want to go back. So now that we got the drivetrain upgrades installed, we went ahead and moved on to the intercooler. For the intercooler, there is a total of 6 14mm bolts that you're going to remove. 3 are for the passenger side intercooler bracket, 1 is for the driver's side, and 2 are for the throttle body mounts. So go ahead and remove all of those. And then lastly, use a pick to remove the C-clip that attaches the intercooler charge pipe upper half to the lower half, and then you should be able to push your intercooler back and slide it all the way out. From there, you will remove the charge pipe from the intercooler, and you can go ahead and slap that on your new Cobb intercooler. Before you throw your OEM intercooler in the bin or in your storage or in the attic or wherever, make sure that you remove the O-ring for the throttle body connection and reinstall that into the Cobb intercooler. You won't want to forget that. That will lead to a very bad time. So lastly, before you install the intercooler, Cobb includes a nice little silicone coupler to replace the factory one. So you're going to want to go ahead and replace that. Be sure that you put it back together in the same orientation that you took it apart, because that little C-clip piece only installs one way. So make sure you pay attention to that. And then after that, you can slide everything back in just the way you took it out and reinstall the bolts in the same order that you took them out in. So lastly, we're gonna move on to the most fun part, which is the thrust tunnel, the big kahuna burger. What this is just basically a hood scoop seal. So to do this, you're going to want to remove the OEM hood scoop shroud, and then from there, you're going to remove the rubber gasket that is attached with these little plastic rivets. I found the easiest way to get it off is just to break them. From there, you're gonna wanna temporarily install your thrust tunnel, as I'm doing here, and just throw a couple of the top bolts in. And then you're gonna flip it over and you're gonna mark on the low points with just like a paint pen or whatever. And then also I drilled pilot holes for the lower bolts that go through. I found this is the best method. So after that, you will take the thrust tunnel back off and you will be given a few small little marks. I used a tape measure to straight edge this and make my marks. And from there, you just have a little bit of trimming to do. Cobb includes a nice little gasket to go over this after you're done. Cutting plastic isn't a ton of fun. I just used a cutoff wheel with a plastic bit on it. You can also use an air saw. I've used those to cut bumpers before and they are super useful. Use your favorite plastic cutting device to trim that excess off. Drill the final holes for the lower bolts. And from there, you will reinstall the thrust tunnel for the last time back onto the OEM shroud, installing all of the included bolts. And then lastly, there is a gasket that you will push onto the thrust tunnel so that it makes that nice seal against the intercooler. And then you just reinstall that back onto the car same way you took it off. So it's a pretty easy process and it cleans everything up, and you got a couple extra little Cobb logos all over your engine bay. Now that we got all these parts installed, and like the last time we were together, we installed our Cobb access port with a stage 1 map. We're gonna throw all this on the dyno, and now you will see the results of that. So yeah, as you guys can see behind you, we have the results of the dyno testing of not only a stock car, our Cobb Stage 1, just a straight flash as the car sits with just a catback exhaust, and as well as the Cobb Stage 1 flash paired with the Cobb intercooler, and the results are, well, as you'd expect. As you can see, there's a gradual increase in each number of these different changes we made to the car. There's a pretty big jump from the totally stock car to the stock car with a stage 1 map. If you notice, there's not a huge jump in peak numbers. It looks like overall we increased 15 horsepower. And that 15 horsepower difference may not seem like a lot, but when you actually look at the dyno graph and see how much area under the curve or how much gains overall you see throughout the entire power band, it actually is very impressive and results in a way more fun car that feels more powerful than it might actually be at those peak numbers. It's not always about the peak, and it actually is about the entire rev range of the car and where you make power throughout the whole thing. So we saw pretty noticeable gains with just that flash across the entire rev range. And as well as with the intercooler, jumped up just a hair bit more. And a part of that is being able to maintain that low intake air temp, keep the car nice and happy, and to prevent any sort of knock events or any reduction in power when the ECU starts to see those high intake air temps. So we're able to maintain a lot more power throughout the entire pull. Another thing to note too is with the Cobb intercooler doing multiple pulls back to back to back, we saw completely consistent flat runs between each of them with no dips or deviations. Whereas when we would dyno this car a few times back to back, we'd see a slight decrease in horsepower as the car started to get hotter and the engine bay got hotter. All in all of these mods tied together just result in a super smooth and satisfying driving experience. You up the power a little bit, and you're also upping just the overall drivetrain feel, and you just kind of get a little bit more connected with the car. All of these mods just overall improve how the car performs and feels, and just makes that investment just a little bit more satisfying. If you want to pick up any of these parts that we showed here today, or any parts in general, go on over to our website at www.MAPerformance.com, call our sales staff, or if you're really feeling ballsy, swing on in and say hi. If you guys like these videos and find them informative and helpful, go ahead and drop a like, comment, subscribe. You know the thing, do the thing. Till next time, guys, it's been real. I'll see you later.